Well, it's tough to beat that. Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. How are you all doing? First, I'm going to take pictures of you all for Facebook. When you find yourself, tag yourself. Okay? I was there. Once again, good morning and welcome. My name is Tamara Alvarado. I'm the MC for today's presentation on the state of women and girls in Santa Clara County. I'm so excited. Yay. My day job that I love and adore, I'm at the School of Arts and Culture at your Mexican Heritage Plaza. Please do visit us. We have lots of stuff going on, after school classes, and this summer our second summer day counts will be starting July 2nd. So a little quick commercial about that. So I know a lot of you in this room had a lot to do with the making, the building, the support of this cultural institution that is so important to all of us. Back to our program. So in 1878, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton drafted the 19th Amendment to grant women the right to vote. 42 years later, the 19th Amendment was ratified on August 18th, 1920. Change is often slow, but once it happens, we all know that there's no turning back. Today, you're going to hear some significant information. For some of you, it might be new and interesting data. However, for many women living and working in Santa Clara County, this information is their reality. They are living examples of the data that will be presented here. We will hear about the challenges for women and girls, but more importantly, we will better understand the opportunities in front of us to create a community where women and girls can be safe, healthy, and have the chance to grow and thrive. To start our program, please join me in welcoming the co-chair of the advisory board and a friend of mine for the State of Women and Girls Report, Andrea Flores Shelton.
Good morning. My son loved summer camp at the School of Arts and Culture last summer, so check it out. Before I start, I do want to take a brief moment, a serious moment, for us to pray for the return, the safe return of Sierra Lamar in Morgan Hill, and wish Sheriff Lori Smith and her team the best of luck in their investigation. Let's take a moment, please. Thank you. Now, back to the excitement of today. This is really a great moment. And on behalf of the advisory board, we thank you for being here as we present the State of Women and Girls Report and launch this very important effort. Over the past 6 months, members of the advisory board have brought their expertise and passion for improving the lives of our most vulnerable women and girls, who we all know are full of potential. Today, I believe that each of you, this really impressive network of leaders, will walk away with a reinvigorated desire for transformation and a renewed commitment to action for the betterment of women and girls, and in turn, our entire valley. We're fortunate to have many elected officials and candidates for office with us today. So in one fell swoop, I'm going to ask if you are an elected official, are a former elected official, or currently running for office, please stand. Let's have a round of applause for these hardworking public servants. Thank you for being here today. This report is a labor of love and is the work of many dedicated people. We must name a few and thank them, especially our fabulous research team, Angelina Aguirre of Creative Mundo Consulting, Lisa Amir Kolvig of Applied Survey Research, Louise Arhan of Working Partnerships USA, our very own and outstanding Public Health Department, the County Office of Education, and we want to thank the many county employees and departments who contributed to the development of this report. Thank you. And without generous sponsors, we would not be here today with this report. So we must thank our Platinum Media sponsor, Comcast, our Gold sponsors, Kaiser Permanente and the Castellano Family Foundation. In addition, we want to recognize Carmen and Al Castellano because they are the premier sponsors of the upcoming Girls Leadership Day, a gathering of 150 dynamic girls from Santa Clara County. This is coming up on March 31st at Camden Community Center. Thank you to our silver sponsors, the Commission on the Status of Women, our supporting sponsors, the Valley Medical Foundation and the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley, and to our community sponsor, the Health Trust. Let's give them all a round of applause. So thank you all for being here. We're going to have a lot of information, and again, I hope we all walk away with a commitment to making change in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. Just quickly, I wanted to reflect back on the work that we did in 2010 and 2011 in terms of the Women and Girls Summit. I always thought I was pretty well connected in terms of issues affecting us. And I learned so much from that experience, and it really expanded my network. And I really want to thank Estette and her team for really leading us in that charge and putting together great teams of volunteers. I was walking in from the parking lot this morning, and I saw somebody that I had met through that, and we reconnected. So thank you again for putting that together. Next up, we are fortunate to have with us two men who have been champions for our community at the local, state, and federal levels. So please welcome, representing the 15th District, Congressman Mike Honda, and President of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, George Shirakawa. They know how to get up here, no problem.
Congressman always speaks first.
Stay in order.
Yeah, I know. We're supposed to stay in order. I'm used to just doing what Andrea tells me to do, so it's kind of hard, Congressman. But good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm honored to be here this morning just to say a couple of words and be surrounded by so many leaders. Some of you are iconic leaders and have had great impact in our community. And two, I want to recognize for sure, I think some of them will be on a panel later, for sure, is former Supervisor Blanc Emeritus, Supervisor Blanca Alvarado, and Susan Hammer, former mayor of San Jose. Not only do they have or have had a great impact on the community and families, women and girls, but they also have impacted men. Because I wouldn't be here today standing with you if it wasn't for their support, and I wanted to recognize that. Now, I'm not saying they don't regret it now, but I want to make sure I recognize them as well as the rest of you as leaders. In 1998, Supervisor Alvarado asked the Board of Supervisors to create the Office of Women's Advocacy. In spite of 2 economic recessions and debilitating cuts to the county budget, totaling over $2 billion over the last 14 years, I'm proud to say that the county continues to maintain a small but mighty, and if you know Esther and Carly, you know they're mighty, Office of Women's Policy. The Office of Women's Policy has effectively used its resources to leverage more funding, and with our Commission on the Status of Women, establish partnerships to address the shared priorities of the federal and county government, which are the same as our community, including equal pay, workplace flexibility, advocating for low-wage workers, women veterans, women in criminal justice system, and survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. I'm particularly proud of the leadership of Sheriff Lori Smith and her office working with the Office of Women's Policy, my office, led by Andrea Flores, and the domestic violence advocates to implement a language access protocol to ensure trust and fairness during times of crisis. This is one example that doesn't make headlines, but yet is making an important difference here in our community. Another example of the power of collaboration in Santa Clara County is the Skills to Succeed program. With federal funding and assistance from the City of San Jose's Housing Department, OWP launched a pilot effort called Skills to Succeed, targeting 50 female ex-offenders with green job training through our local partners, CET, CTC, Working Partnerships USA. And OWP has been a leader in our reentry efforts, as all of you know, and you'll see why in a clip. And Congressman Honda, right now we were supposed to go to the clip, but now we have to have you in between me and the clip, but I just wanted to share that with you. But thank you. I know you're going to have a great day this morning, all of you. Those of you who are visiting, welcome to the county, and I know you're going to have a fantastic day. Congressman Honda.
Thank you, George. And I didn't mean to mess up but this is a county, I'm your visitor now. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for having me. It's great to be back here in this county, in this building, in this area where it is known as the feminist capital of the world. That title was given a few years ago, and if you want to really understand what that really means, just look over here in the first row, and we have them all here. And of course, my sister Zoe Lofgren. But to all of you, I just want to say good morning. Thank you for your guidance. The first woman who led my life is my mother, and she's still around. And but she taught me to understand that you can be a man, but you have to damn well be a feminist too. And I think that President Obama understood that, and when he first came into office, he established that first National Council on Women and Girls. And I think he felt that vibration, and he understood. I think Michelle had something to do with it too. So this is an exciting time. I'm looking very much forward to the report. I'm proud to be part of the history of this area, but more than anything else, I'm proud to have been a student of yours. And also, hopefully, that we've been able to do something with that understanding that you've taught us. And let me just close with this. I support Planned Parenthood.
Now the video, right?
A unique program is helping women in Santa Clara County transform their resumes and their lives. It's giving them a future that many thought was never even possible. ABC 7's Karina Rusk.
This construction training program comes with a couple of twists. It's not just designed for women, but women with records, former offenders trying to turn their lives around. Andrea Huerta has spent more than half of her life locked up.
I don't want my kids to go through what I went through, and so I try to make the changes now, and my choices are so much better than they used to be. I think twice about everything I do.
One big decision was breaking free of her drug addictions. Signing up for this program is another. The group working partnerships, along with Santa Clara County's Office of Women's Policy, are using the federal grant money for pre-apprenticeship training. The goal is to get these 12 women into good-paying construction jobs, moving them from being a tax burden to a taxpayer.
It gives us an opportunity not only to be ourselves, but to learn how to do something different that's going to better ourselves and our family, our children.
This 5-day boot camp with hands-on training in Livermore is just one element of the workforce preparation. The majority of this 8-week program is actually classroom instruction with a variety of professionals giving these students the skills they need to succeed in any industry. The curriculum focuses on how to get a job and be a good employee. There's also a healthy dose of motivation.
There are people who want to fit in society, be productive in our society. They have a huge skill base. If you just look at who they are now and work with who they are now.
Smith says the building trades are always looking for qualified women, and there's no question he's inspiring some new recruits.
I didn't have the direction, I didn't have the guidance, and now this program is giving me all that, so I feel like, the sky's the limit.
Indeed, some of the jobs could literally take the graduates to new heights. In Livermore, Karina Rusk, ABC 7 News.
Terrific.
Yeah.
That was pretty exciting. Santa Clara County is one of very few counties anywhere in the United States to have an office specifically dedicated to women and girls. Under the direction of Esther Perales Diekman, the Office of Women's Policy and its mighty team, as it's been noted earlier today, mighty team of professional and phenomenal women work every day to ensure that the voice of women is heard in the county and in our community. Esther, Carla, Boo, Carrie, and Julie, we appreciate all your hard work and commitment on behalf of women and girls across the county. Please welcome Carla Collins, who will give us an overview of the report. Carla?
Good morning. Innovation and creativity are some of the enduring strengths of Silicon Valley. They're the driving force behind its global success as a leading hub for high-tech innovation and development. However, in the ongoing search for solutions to address complex economic and social challenges, one of the most significant investments that can be made today has seemingly gone unnoticed and untapped, and that's the inclusion of women and girls in shaping our economy and our community. It's in fact shocking how little focus there is on women as stakeholders, as contributors, and as leaders. What do we know about the women in our county? Which kind of health issues do they face? Are they safe? Which kinds of opportunities do they have to advance and prosper? We are very proud to bring you the state of women and girls in Santa Clara County. Several speakers are going to help us with our next presentation. County Executive Jeff Smith will provide an overview of the demographics. Amy Reedy of the Santa Clara County Public Health Department will give us an overview of women's health. Linda Seves of the County Office of Education will follow with information on education. Ruth Shikata from the Office of the County Executive will share information about economics, and then rounding out the presentation will be District Attorney Jeff Rosen, who will review violence and crime. But we're going to start with our County Executive, Jeff Smith. Jeff?
Well, hello, and welcome. This is exciting, and it's really a pleasure and a very big source of pride in my office to have the Office of Women's Policy located there, showing that it's a really critical component of our county's life and existence. So before we get into the status of women and girls in Santa Clara County, we need to look at who they are. And when I was asked by Andrea to talk about who women are, I thought of a story from my experiences in medical school that stuck with me very much for my entire life. You know, we were looking at genetics, and you know the difference between men and women is women have 2 X chromosomes and men have an X and a Y. And the professor said, yeah, you know, look at that Y. You know what that Y chromosome is really a defective X chromosome. Because it doesn't have the extra leg on it. So what that means to me is that women are really actually the most full and complete expression of humanity. And it also gave me an excuse for being defective. But we are here to celebrate the fact that women are really the core of our society. Without all the leadership and love and caring that we've had in our community throughout our life from women in our lives, we would not be a society worth living in. So we're going to talk a little bit about demographics. So let's start with the first slide there, which is our current and projected population for women in this county. You can see that up until the age of about 55, women are proportionately a little bit less represented in each age group than men. However, after 55, the men die off, and women become a much larger proportion of that particular age. Not listed here on the slide is a projection of what happens going out forward until 2050. And at that point, you can see that women, in your handouts that are in the report, that women increase proportionally about 30%, and then over 65, they will increase 145% of our population at that age group. Next, we're going to go on to race and ethnicity. This indicator measures the distribution of the female population in our county, and we found that the population is almost equally divided among Caucasians, Asians, and Latinas. Among the Asian population, the pie is fairly proportional among Chinese, Vietnamese, Indian, and Filipino representation, with essentially representation of all of the Asian continents. Also, I think significant in here is a much increased proportion of multiracial, multi-ethnic women. So we're seeing really a melting pot occurring in our county where many races and ethnicities are being represented. Next group. This is a bar graph about nativity. This measures the percentage of women who are foreign-born in contrast to the women who are born in this county. Close to 40% of the women in Santa Clara County are foreign-born. According to the 2010 survey, 70% of Asian women in our county are born outside the United States, emphasizing our need to respect countries of origin and different cultures and have culturally competent ways of communicating with all of our population, specifically with our women and girls. Next is our language information. This graph measures English language proficiency. Approximately 3/4 of the women and girls in the county effectively communicate in English, which is slightly less than the men and boys. This means that 1 in 4 women in our county struggle with English. However, this trend is reversing among the younger generations. And in the age group of 5 to 17, 91% of girls are fluent in English compared to 89% of boys. See, I told you boys were defective. Next is household composition. This pie chart indicates the living arrangements of women in our county. We found that 63% of the households, which include women, are married couple households. The single mother households outnumber the single father households by more than 3 to 1. 29,800 households to 8,900 households, respectively, re-emphasizing the fact that for the most part, all of our households in the community are led by women, and the nurturing and love that's necessary for growth comes from women in those households. Next is caregivers. In this chart, we see the percentage of women caregivers by factors such as age, marital status, educational level, and employment status. 2 recent county surveys show that the women are more likely than men to be caregivers for an elder family member living inside or outside their home. Of those women caregivers, 58% are married. As you can imagine, the weight of responsibility that comes with caregiving will affect women differently depending on their circumstances and the support that they have. Honoring the diversity of our county is essential to effective decision-making. Our snapshot that you've seen here, and you can see in your report, shows a population that is growing increasingly older. Also, when we consider that 40% of all women in the county are born in another county or another country, and 1/4 of all the women do not speak English well, we must look closely at how our policies, procedures, and services are designed and whether they meet the actual needs of the women in our community, remembering always that meeting the needs of women in our community means meeting the needs of our entire community, because women make our community. Now we'll hear from Linda Aceves, who is our Chief Academic Officer from Santa Clara County Office of Education, and she'll tell us about education and the population of women and girls.
Good morning. It's absolutely my pleasure to be here with you this morning. In my previous job, about 6 months ago, I was the Chief Academic Officer, and now I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Schools Officer in providing leadership and support to over 9,000 to 10,000 students that are currently in our Santa Clara County Office of Education programs, including our students with highest needs, special education, alternative court and community, foster youth, migrant education, science, as well as our students that have other special needs. So this morning, it's my pleasure to share with you some data indicators relative to education. And I'm going to highlight areas that focus primarily in readiness skills for girls, development, and achievement. Your handout has many more details, but I'm going to hit a few of the key areas. Something that's been quite notable to me that I realized as I was looking at this data is that we have come a long way, baby, as they say in the world. I can remember being in high school with my counselor and my mother and I sitting down and her saying, after looking at my assessment and my aptitude, her telling my mother, not college material. Perhaps should stay home and take care of children. And my mother looked at this woman and said, watch her. I dare you to say that to my daughter who can do anything she wants to do. So I thank my mother for standing up for me, and I'm hopeful that when you look at this data, you'll see that we have made some huge growth, but we also have some ways to go. So let's take a look at our first indicator. We call this kindergarten readiness, and this is a measure that demonstrates students' readiness for kindergarten and later school success. And the tool is used to measure readiness that captures in kindergarten academics, self-regulation, social expression, as well as self-care and motor skills. It's important because we know from several studies nationwide that, as well as 2 local longitudinal studies from kindergarten readiness, this is a huge predictor of student success in school. So what's referenced in your handout is that you'll see that girls are more ready for kindergarten than their male counterparts. No surprise, right, women? And that girls have stronger proficiency than boys in 2 of the most critical areas for school, which we call correlated to 3rd grade success: kindergarten academics and self-regulation. We are very controlled, right? So that does help us in our school system. And we also know that those 2 areas have been consistently growing and women are doing better in those particular areas. But when you look at that, we also know that while 50% are doing well, we also have 50% that are not proficient in those areas, which should give us some cause to be concerned. But most importantly, when you look at this chart relative to the average readiness score by the key demographic groups, you'll see that girls are least likely to be ready in kindergarten if they have not attended preschool, if they are low income, and if they are Latina. So that gives us much pause. Let's look at the next area indicator, which we call 3rd grade reading. In this area, we know that in 3rd grade we measure this because 3rd grade is a watershed year for education in terms of predicting academic outcomes. As an educator, we used to look at students in 3rd grade, and we could tell right away, if we go all the way back to their 3rd grade record, it's a huge indicator of where the student began to have difficulty in school and became less and less apparent to be successful. So what you can see in this chart is that in Santa Clara County, girls consistently have better 3rd grade reading scores than boys, and they perform higher than girls across the state too. And the percentage of girls at grade level is steadily increasing, which is very good news for celebration. But that also means that 40% of our girls are still not reading at grade level. And remember when we showed you the last slide around kindergarten readiness, that girls who have the successful skills around the achievement gap that are indicating that for those girls that have not been in preschool, we still have a lot of work to do to help them be successful. So if you're not a preschool advocate, you better be if you're looking for educational success. The next indicator is called developmental assets. And this indicator is the percentage of youth who have developmental assets in terms of their internal strengths and their external supports that are measured for a youth's healthy development and good school outcomes. You may have heard of the 41 assets development. We've seen a great alignment of those, and to the degree that a student has those indicators, we know that they'll be more successful in school. So here's what we found. and you'll see this in your handout, that girls in grades 4th through 6 in Santa Clara County have higher overall levels of developmental assets, 40%, than boys in the county, 35%, and their levels are higher than girls across the state, 37%. And we also see in the charts in your handout that the girls are faring better than the boys on 37 of the 40 assets that were measured in 2010. The 3 assets, however, in which girls are lower than boys are around self-esteem, sense of purpose, and participation in youth activities, which might give you some pause in terms of how you interact with women. And what you'll see in the chart is that the percent of girls with specific assets by grade, you can see that as girls get older, the lower assets they go in every category, which also gives us much pause to think about how we're interacting and supporting our young women in our high school, our middle and high schools. Our 4th indicator is looking at high school graduation. Once again, as you know, high school graduation is a huge stepping stone to college and economic opportunity, and conversely, those doors become locked to kids who don't graduate. So in this chart, we know that girls are more likely than boys to graduate from high school, and the graduation rate in Santa Clara County is higher than that in the state. However, according to the 4-year derived rate, Latina and African American girls are less likely than Asian and Caucasian girls to graduate, which is another area in which we need to continually emphasize in our educational programs. Last but not least, I'm going to share a slide called Education Attainment. And this measures the summative or overall education attainment level of both men and women. And of course, as you know, this is critically important in higher education success, as it is associated with greater earning potential, as well as better family and child outcomes. So there are many, many indicators in your book that refer to the overall countywide and across all grades, all age groups, and we see that women still obtain less education than men. 41% have bachelor's degrees or higher compared to 47% of men. And although we see some gains in the previous slide, we hope that this will translate into higher education success. Indeed, we also know that women from the ages of 25 to 34 now have higher levels of education than men, indicating women and girls have better access today to education and that they are taking advantage of that access. Now, when you look at this slide, though, this may give you some thinking to talk about as you realize that education attainment for women again varies by ethnicity. And as you can see that 56% of Asians have BAs or higher compared to only 16% of Latinas. And as you know, that does not represent our population here in Santa Clara County. So again, we have some work to do in this achievement gap. Women are more likely to hold degrees in the humanities than men, and are more likely to hold and are less likely to hold the degrees in engineering and math. So again, we have some work to do into getting our women an equal footing into those areas. And of course, we're hoping that the trajectory from the successes that we're seeing in our elementary, middle, and high schools will now translate as we move into higher education. So what's this mean for us? Well, certainly, as I said before, we've come a long way, baby, right? We've made some difference, we've made some growth, and our girls are beginning to certainly do and exceed boys in our educational systems. However, we shouldn't overlook the fact that much must be done to improve the school performance of our students in our county, and we definitely need to pay attention to our racial and ethnic disparities that our groups are still demonstrating in many of these key indicators. The demands in higher education in this area that we must focus in, and we must be able to provide some support as well as promote women's participation in these educational programs that lead them to the success. So with that, I'm going to turn now the mic over to Ruth Shikata from the Office of the County's Executive Economic Development, and she's going to lead us through the economic data for women. Thank you.
Good morning. Well, economically, it's been a tough 5+ years for pretty much everyone, but especially for women. Let's start by looking at employment. We looked at women's participation in the labor force and their employment rates. What we found was about 60% of women are in the workforce. That's compared to 74% of men. In every year since 2000, the women's unemployment rate has been higher than the men's unemployment rate. There was an exception to that in 2010 when both groups' unemployment rates were about 11%. Here in Silicon Valley, we're known for our entrepreneurial spirit. So we looked at an indicator measuring the percentage of privately held companies that are owned by women. This statistic is important because we want to see that women are having and taking opportunities to build businesses just as their male counterparts do. What we found was in Santa Clara County, the percentage of firms owned by women has increased slightly since 2002, from 28% to 31%, and this is comparable with a statewide average of about 30%. Although women own 30% of the local businesses, in terms of gross receipts, these women-owned firms earn much less and employ fewer people than firms owned by men. We know that employment in science, technology, engineering, math, and green fields are only going to be increasing in the future, and these jobs tend to be higher paying. In a recent study by the Institute of Women's Policy Research, it was noted that jobs in science, engineering, technology, and math, or STEM fields, are expected to grow by 17% between 2008 and 2018, nearly double the growth of all other fields. However, it was also noted that women have been losing ground in the receipt of STEM degrees from community colleges over the last decade. We looked at the rate by which women are going into these jobs of the future. And what we found was that of the people employed in STEM occupations, just 23% are women. Some STEM occupations are also green occupations, so of the people employed in non-STEM green occupations, only 31% were women. Looking at the data another way, across the labor force, men are twice as likely as women to be employed in STEM or green occupations. This next indicator is occupational wages. It's important to understand because, as we pointed out, occupational pathways directly correlate with the earnings potential of women. As you saw in the education section presented earlier, women and men get different degrees in different fields, get degrees in their different fields. Similarly, they go into different fields of work. What you see in this chart are the major occupational categories for both women and men, such as management, sales, education, office, and administration. You also see that men earn more than women in every occupational category except for one, office and administration. On an overall basis, men earn 28% more than women, and in some occupations, this gap jumps to almost 50%. Continuing on the theme of earnings, the next slide measures annual earnings for men and women according to their educational levels. What we found was at all levels of education, men earn more than women. In fact, the pay gap increases at higher educational levels. Men with advanced degrees earn $40,000 a year more than women who hold the same degrees. As you've seen in the previous slides, women are less likely than men to be business owners. Their businesses bring in less income. They are underrepresented in STEM and green careers, and they earn less than men, even in the same job or educational category. All of these factors lead to significant challenges on the economic well-being of women. This next indicator measures the percentage of women and girls living below the federal poverty level. This income level is currently $22,500 a year for a family of 4. You can imagine the tremendous difficulty of making ends meet in Santa Clara County at this income level. What we found is since 2000, women and girls have consistently been more likely than men and boys to be living in poverty, and the rate increased during the Great Recession. As we see in the second chart on the bottom, you probably can see better in your books, the entry level of education, women are more likely than men to be in poverty, though the gap narrows with the higher levels of education. So we all know that the federal poverty level sets a very low standard of living in the Bay Area. Extremely difficult. So what we did was we also looked at an indicator that measures the percentage of households living below a more realistic standard of living, the local self-sufficiency standard for our county. This income level is the amount needed to afford the basic needs related to housing, childcare, food, transportation, health care in Santa Clara County. The annual income threshold for a household of 4 to be self-sufficient here is $76,420. What we found was that overall 1 in 3 Santa Clara County households lives below the self-sufficiency standard. The percentage of single mothers with incomes below the self-sufficiency standard increased from 45% in 2000 to 76% in 2010. By comparison, 56% of single fathers had incomes below the self-sufficiency standard in 2010. Women living alone were also more likely than men living alone to have incomes below the standard. Whichever way we look at the data, the bottom line is that women in this county are more likely than men not to earn enough to be self-sufficient. Here are some key findings from the special analysis section in our report, which examined the economic impact of the Great Recession on women and men in Santa Clara County. The Great Recession threw 64,000 Santa Clara County residents out of work and sent employment rates skyrocketing for both women and men. The demographic group hardest hit was African American women with an unemployment rate of 20%. While men suffered heavier employment losses than women, the economic recovery has been much slower for women, as it's taken longer for women to regain their employment. Following the recession, women were more likely than men to be long-term unemployed, a reversal of the typical pattern. Women were also more likely to be underemployed. A major factor behind the lack of recovery for women is the ongoing job losses in the public sector. The public sector workforce is predominantly female. So what does this all mean? Women in Santa Clara County experience a higher gender wage gap than the national average. In fact, men earn more than women at all levels of education and in almost all occupational groups. Women are underrepresented as local business owners and in the highest paying careers which are projected for growth in Santa Clara County, such as STEM and green jobs. Women are more likely than men to be below the self-sufficiency standard, especially when they are a single parent. Our strategic policy agenda must directly address our most vulnerable worker, women, and if we are to create a sustainable and prosperous economy for Silicon Valley. I'd like to now turn over the presentation to Dr. Amy Reedy from the Santa Clara County Public Health Department, who will share the highlights of the health of women and girls in our community.
Good morning. It's an honor to be here. I'm representing the Public Health Department. I'm going to share just a few slides on health, and you can imagine it was quite a challenge to pick a handful of indicators to represent the whole area of women's and girls' health, but we're going to share with you just 6 today. Health insurance coverage is measured by adults who have access to some kind of health care insurance. That could be private, prepaid plans, or government plans. This is important because studies have shown that people without health insurance have higher mortality, and they're more likely to forego routine examinations that can place them at higher risk for undiagnosed conditions. What we found in Santa Clara County is that although women are more likely than men to have health insurance coverage, overall rates of health insurance for both have decreased considerably from 2000, which was 92%, to 82% in 2009, again, a byproduct of the recession. There are ethnic disparities in coverage, with African American and Latino women being less likely to have health coverage than Caucasian and Asian women. Birth rates are measured by the number of live births during a year per 1,000 people in the population.
This is an important indicator because birth rate is a dominant factor in determining the rate of population growth. It also can be associated with the status of women in relation to reproduction autonomy and the level of education about contraception and family planning. What we found is women are having children at later ages, and overall the teen birth rate has declined. However, rates do vary by race and ethnicity and geographic region in the county. Latino women had consistently higher birth rates across age groups, including teens. The teen birth rates are highest in South County and parts of East San Jose and Central San Jose. We measure health status by adults' perception of his or own health, including the number of days in the past 30 days in which mental health was reported as not good. This is important because overall health depends on both physical and mental well-being. Measuring the number of days when people report that their mental health is not good, it represents an important facet of health-related quality of life. In Santa Clara County, we found a higher percentage of women, 35%, reported experiencing poor mental health in the past month compared to men, which was 29%. African American women were more likely to report poor mental health than any other racial or ethnic group. Well, the Public Health Department likes to talk about obesity and obesity prevention, and unfortunately it's still an indicator of crucial concern. This indicator is measured by the body mass index in both adults and adolescents. BMI categories for the Centers for Disease Control are used to determine whether someone is obese or overweight. And this is important because overweight or obese individuals are at increased risk for many chronic conditions, including hypertension, diabetes, breast cancer, and heart disease. Childhood obesity is a particular concern because we know that children who are obese are more likely to be obese as adults. What we found in Santa Clara County is that overall women are actually less likely than men to be overweight or obese, but their rates have been increasing from 43% in 2000 to 49% in 2009. We found that foreign-born women are less likely to be overweight and obese than native-born women. The percent of girls who are overweight is improving slightly, while the percentage for boys is flat. Preventive screenings are measured by the percentage of women who reported having a mammogram or pap smear. This is important because preventive screenings help detect disease in its early stages when it's more likely to be successfully treated and even cured. And what we found in Santa Clara County is that women did very well in this area. They had higher rates of receiving a pap test and/or mammogram than women in California and across the United States. However, these rates vary by ethnicity, and the data showed that Asian women are less likely to have routine pap tests, and Latina and African American women are the least likely to have mammograms in the last 2 years. The final indicator is chronic diseases. This indicator represents the percentage of women who reported ever being told that they had a heart attack, angina, stroke, or diabetes by a doctor or a healthcare professional. This, of course, is important because heart disease and strokes are among the leading causes of death in the United States and also major causes of disability. Diabetes is a serious, lifelong condition that can cause significant disability. For the most part, chronic diseases can be controlled with medication and lifestyle changes, and although they are the most common and costly health problems, they are also among the most preventable. What we found is a higher percentage of men reported ever having a heart attack or angina compared to women, but a higher percentage of women in Santa Clara County reported that they had had a stroke. So just to summarize, we see a mixed diagnosis of health in Santa Clara County with some key disparities that command our attention and action. These are winnable battles for our community, and if we're successful, we can improve the health and quality of life for women in our community. For the first time, we have an opportunity to provide national health care for all Americans, and I might add a strong focus on prevention. And it's important that we make sure that the system is gender responsive, trauma informed, and culturally competent. At this time, our district attorney, Jeff Rosen, will lead us through the indicators related to crime and violence. Thank you.
Good morning. A few months ago, we were trying to decide what movie to go out and see. And so my wife and 2 daughters and I were talking about the movies that were in the theater, and so we voted, as we often do in our house when we make important decisions. And the vote was 3-1 in favor of seeing The Vow. And I turned to my wife and said, I'm surrounded by women. And my wife, a federal prosecutor, a skilled cross-examiner, said to me, and what's wrong with that? Submitted. So when we talk about the criminal justice system, one overall takeaway is women are much less likely to be the perpetrators of violence. Unfortunately, they are more likely to be the victims of many types of crimes of violence. So our first slide relates to child abuse. This indicator measures substantiated reports of child abuse, and it's important because our research has shown that exposure to maltreatment is strongly linked to later outcomes, such as poor emotional and physical health, academic success, and in some cases, later involvement with the juvenile justice system. What you see in the chart is the rate of substantiated cases of maltreatment over time for girls and boys. And what we found is girls are slightly more likely than boys to be the victims of child abuse. Reports of child abuse are also more prevalent among some racial and ethnic groups. Compared to Caucasian girls, Latina girls are twice as likely, and African American girls are 5 times as likely to have substantiated cases of child maltreatment or child abuse. School safety. This is an indicator that helps to measure girls' feelings of safety at school. And it's of course important because when girls don't feel safe at school, it affects their attendance, their grades, their self-esteem, and other aspects of their well-being. What we found is that while 60% of female students reported that they feel safe in their school, a higher percentage of female students, 47%, reported that they experienced psychological bullying on school property compared to male students. Cyberbullying was also reported more in female students, 24%, than in male students, 17%. Juvenile justice. This indicator measures the involvement of girls in the juvenile justice system, and it's important because we know that involvement in the juvenile justice system is a red flag for problems girls are experiencing at home, at school, and in their communities and neighborhoods. But it's also a predictor of continued involvement or criminality later as an adult. Boys are more likely than girls to become wards of the juvenile court. As you can see, 85% of the wards are male, 15% are female. Trends for both groups show decreasing caseloads over time. However, again, we have some racial and ethnic groups that are over and underrepresented in our juvenile hall. Latina girls are about 30% of the county female population, but represent 70% of the girls that are wards of juvenile court, compared to 8% who are African American and 14% who are Caucasian. So over the last few years, the population of our juvenile hall has decreased anywhere between 40 and 50%, which is very good news. but the overrepresentation and disproportionate percentages of Latinas and African Americans has remained constant. So we need to continue to work on that. Domestic violence. These indicators measure the extent to which women experience intimate partner violence. It's important because we know the devastating effects of domestic violence on women's physical and emotional health, economic security, and the toll that exposure to domestic violence has on children. There are no good, reliable proxies for the true prevalence of domestic violence in our communities. We know it's underreported. It's hard for us to know by how much. This report looked at multiple sources of data, including 911 calls to law enforcement. It also looked at requests for shelter, calls to hotlines, and deaths due to domestic violence. Overall, the demand for domestic violence shelters is increasing in Santa Clara County, yet our resources to meet this increased demand are shrinking. In fact, between the years 2010 and 2011, the number of people turned away from shelters increased by 75%. Deaths due to domestic violence, which had been steadily declining over the last 5 to 10 years, we saw a spike in 2011 with 17 domestic violence-related homicides. I think it's too soon to tell whether that's a trend or simply a one-year spike. Victims of domestic violence-related homicide were most likely to be Latino, followed by Asian and Caucasian. Overall, 24% of the homicide victims in our county were children. Does this mean we're all supposed to take a nap now? I can continue. Or, okay. Horse walks into a bar. Bartender says, "Why the long face?" That's about the extent of what I've got. The last two indicators relate to first arrests and then adult protection. So in terms of arrests, the arrest rate of women has remained steady over the last 10 years, and it's lower than the arrest rate for men. The most common offense for which women are arrested is driving under the influence. What we found is that women are less likely than men to be arrested, and while men's arrest rates have dropped over the last 5 to 10 years, women's arrest rates have remained constant, still much lower than the rate in which men are arrested, but we haven't seen the same decrease that we've seen with the arrest rate for men, and the most common crime that women are arrested for is driving under the influence. The last topic is adult protection. Adult women in Santa Clara County are almost twice as likely as men to suffer abuse or neglect. This is very important because the rate of abuse suffered by elderly women, those who are that we categorize 65 or over, or who are adult dependents, which means they're unable to care or advocate for themselves. When we looked at different types of abuse, such as financial, mental suffering, neglect, assault and battery, women were more likely in every one of those categories to be victims than men. So again, women much less likely to be the perpetrator of crimes, particularly violent crimes. However, women more likely to be the victims of crimes, particularly violent crimes. Senior and dependent adult women are almost twice as likely as men to suffer abuse and neglect. Overall, we see some decline in rates of women and girls and their abuse, but they're still much more likely to be abused than men or boys. Our approach in Santa Clara County continues to be to work toward a collaborative response to violence and crime by engaging multiple stakeholders. Our goal is to partner across systems and with community groups to address intervention and prevention of violence and crime in a manner that is sensitive to the different cultures and gender needs of our residents. And I would maybe just conclude by mentioning that in the last year, we've hired 15 new prosecutors in the district attorney's office. 9 were women. 6 were men. And for the first time in the history of the District Attorney's Office, 50% of our prosecutors are women and 50% are men. Thank you.
I don't have to tell you that we were working to the 0 hour, just getting the report even delivered to the county building. So that came late last night, and I went home and my 7-year-old still wasn't in bed. And I had so much to do. I had to look at my talking points, and he said, "I need you to lay down with me, Mom." So I laid down, and he said, "Tell me a story." And I said, "Once upon a time, there was a mama gorilla who had a lot of work to do." And then he said to me, "And she was head of monkey policy, fighting for the right of monkeys to scratch their butts." Not exactly what I do, but close. This report doesn't just belong to the Office of Women's Policy, and it doesn't just belong to the fabulous research team that helped us put it together. It belongs to all of us in this room. So when you go to the Office of Women's Policy website, you're going to see this report live and moving. It's going to be moving because from today until May 31st, you're going to be emailing us, you're going to be calling us, you're going to invite us over to speak with women that you work with, because we want to know what are the questions we need to be asking, what are the concerns of women and girls in our community, who are the groups of women who are most in need, and what do we need to do as a community to move forward so that we can see some real change. And when we reach August at the Women's Equality Day event sponsored by the Commission on the Status of Women, we will release our county-wide women and girls policy agenda, because we can no longer afford to miss the opportunities that are here to advance women. We've made a lot of progress, but much more remains to be done. And you are the street-level champions that can help us get there. So we will be working together this year in 2012 and beyond to make sure that change comes. And we're very excited today because we have a very special panel of women here. As it was mentioned earlier, this is the feminist capital of the world. But it took a bit of work to get there, and we have with us the women who are responsible for that title and who have changed the face of Silicon Valley politics. And I'd like to bring up Sue Murphy from Kaiser Permanente, one of our sponsors, to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning.
Hi, good morning. I'm Sue Murphy. I'm with Kaiser Permanente, and it's an honor to be here in front of you all today. And it's a particular honor to be in front of, or sitting right behind, a panel of women who have been my personal role model for the 25 years that I've served in this community. So, wow, what an exciting day. At Kaiser Permanente, we know the importance of excellence data and the importance of developing policies that reflect best practices, are gender responsive, and meet the needs of clients, whether we're talking about medical care or about any system of care. That is why we're proud to partner with the Office of Women's Policy and to be part of this bigger initiative for women and girls. At this time, I am honored to introduce a woman that really needs no introduction, Representative Zoe Lofgren. She has been a Democratic member of the United States House of Representatives since 1995, representing the 16th District of California. Representative Lofgren is a chair of the California Democratic Congressional Delegation and currently serves on the House Judiciary Committee, the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and the Committee on House Administration. Representative Lofgren is well regarded for her work in the area of technology, particularly on patent reform, copyright issues, digital rights, and net neutrality. Representative Lofgren has been a longtime advocate of comprehensive immigration reform and has fought to protect homeowners, Medicare and Social Security, as well as the rights of working families and women's reproductive rights. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Representative Zoe Lofgren.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to be here, and as Mike said, it feels like home to be in this chambers, and it was fun to be able to sit with my cohorts here. As you can see, they'll be on the panel next. We have a lot to be proud of in this county. I talk about us all the time. I remember years ago, I mentioned to a colleague on the floor of the House that there was no ethnic majority in my county, and we had this rich diversity. And he said, well, we have diversity at home too. We've got Baptists and Methodists in the same town. I said, well, it's not quite the same here. We also have a rich history of women having positions of authority. And when I was first elected to the Board of Supervisors, women were a majority of the board. I served with my colleague Susie Wilson, who will be up next, and my colleague Becky Morgan. And at the time, we had Janet Gray Hayes was the mayor of the city of San Jose. There was a majority of the city council in San Jose were women. And it was Janet Gray who pronounced that we were the feminist capital of the world. And I remember at the time, it wasn't just the city and the county, but there were a majority of the mayors of the other smaller cities were also female. And so we were indeed making great strides forward, but I think someone who said at the beginning of the proceeding that there's no going back, that's not exactly the case. And I think my colleagues, former colleagues, will talk about that. Why does this matter? Well, we've seen the reports, and it's worth noting that there is a persistent wage gap between women and men in the workforce. And today, it's still about nationwide that women earn about 77 cents for every dollar that a male employee works. And there's been virtually no progress in closing that gap in the last 3 years. The median income for women is less than for men. And so this has an impact not just on those women, but also on their families and the ability for us to progress and be successful as a society. Now, the good news is that the wage gap in California is slowly narrowing, and it's somewhat smaller than the nationwide gap. But the Paycheck Fairness Act, which passed the U.S. House but fell short in the Senate, would go a lot farther into helping to close the wage gap between men and women. When you look at STEM fields, and of course in Silicon Valley, science, technology, engineering, and math is what drives the economy. The gap between men and women in those fields is even wider. It's really unacceptable. On average, men in STEM jobs earn $36.34 an hour. Women earn just $31.11 an hour. And that's higher than the disparity between men and women in non-STEM jobs. Now, why do I mention this? Public policy can matter, and public policy, of course, is decided by that thing we don't always like, politics. It's worth noting that the very first bill that President Obama signed was the Lilly Ledbetter Paycheck Protection Act. It was passed and brought down to the White House for him to sign right after he was sworn in. When we look at education gaps, and I know that the panel following me, and especially Becky, who spent so much time when we served together here and later in her distinguished career in the state senate, will talk about education. But we can see from the data that young girls are not progressing as they should when it comes to STEM fields. And of course, in this area, we can see that the high-paid positions are in those STEM fields. And I was talking to Diane sitting next to her. You take a look at the figure of Latinas in those fields. It is appalling. It is wrong. And we need to do something about that. If women and other represented groups were to join the ranks of our STEM success people, the shortage that we have now of professionals in that field would almost disappear. And for those of you who think, well, girls aren't necessarily good at math, and I guess I might be one example of that, take a look at how women are progressing in these fields in other countries. Take a look at our neighbor to the north, Canada. You don't find this disparity in STEM education in Canada. You do find it in the United States. So we have work to do here as well. I want to talk about another area where policy does matter, and that's the Violence Against Women Act. We are in a tough fight right now to reauthorize the act. I'm sorry to report that. And why is it important? The Violence Against Women Act did something that was really unprecedented, which is to say that the federal government is a partner with state, local, and private sector to make violence against women a national priority. Funding was provided to local communities to help for shelters, and certainly this county has been a leader in supporting shelters so that women can get out of abusive situations. We helped with prosecution of violence against women. We did something that as a former immigration lawyer and a former chair of the Immigration Subcommittee I know is important, which is to give an opportunity for women whose immigration papers are not in order to still seek the protection of the police and the district attorney by saying, if you're a victim of violence, we're going to make a special provision for you so that your abuser can't use the immigration system to get a free pass on beating you up. Now, all of that was a product of a lot of work, and I'll say a bipartisan consensus. As you know, the parties are kind of warring at times in Washington, but we had deliberative and collaborative work in the Congress, and conservatives and non-conservatives came together and said, this is the right thing to do. And we passed this bill. Now, we've had a situation where the far right finally actually has said no. They've said no to providing the immigration relief to victims and really have put the entire reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act in jeopardy. And I think it's important just to mention that that's not the only situation where the bipartisan consensus for women's rights is under assault. Some people have said it's the war against women. But Planned Parenthood, we had here a local consensus. It's primarily a Democratic county, but I was pleased to serve with my colleague, then a Republican, Becky Morgan. We supported Planned Parenthood. We supported reproductive health rights. That was not anything that divided us along party lines. And now there's an effort to defund Planned Parenthood. I was mentioning to Becky, on the Judiciary Committee, we had a 3-hour hearing on birth control. Here we are, it's 2012, and we're having a discussion about birth control. We have even the attack on health care reform. One of the things in the bill is to prevent disqualification for insurance based on pre-existing conditions. If you're a 45-year-old woman, you have a pre-existing condition. And to say that those protections should not be put in place is really a problem. That gets me back to what we need to do. We need to put our agenda together and pursue it, but I'd also like to give a little thought to the electoral situation. It was mentioned I chair the California Democratic Delegation. A majority of the California Democratic Delegation are women. It's the only place in the United States where that is true. We have our former Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, who still remains the leader of our party. In the Bay Area, a majority of the congressional delegation are female. Now, does that mean that we're always right? Certainly not. But I know from my experience here on the Board of Supervisors, serving with Susie Wilson and Diane McKenna and Becky Morgan, and obviously observing those who followed us, Blanca and Liz, that the women members sometimes pay attention to things a little bit different. a little bit different. And it has to do, I remember Becky's advocacy for what was happening with teenagers and the things that Diane and Susie helped form the committee on women and children. We had that as a major agenda. So I think it does matter who represents you. And I met with a group yesterday of legislators from Tunisia. They're trying to form their new government, and they came to the House of Representatives to get some advice, which I thought was quite lovely. Dan Lundgren, who's the chairman of the committee, conservative Republican, and myself met with them. We didn't have a disagreement on how things, we had many disagreements on some things, but how we organize and how we work our love for the country, there's no disagreement about that. And at the end of the meeting, one of the legislators, who was female, said, well, I'd like to talk to the woman congressman because I'd like to know how many of you there are. And it turns out Tunisia has elected more women to their parliament than we have as a percentage of our House of Representatives. I had to give them credit for that, but it started me thinking about the work we have to do. We had a majority on the Board of Supervisors. Next year, we're not going to have a single female member on the Board of Supervisors. We have actually regressed on the number of women in the House of Representatives instead of moving forward. So I hope that as we push our agenda, we'll also keep in mind that we want to have a day where the legislative bodies that we elect look like America, not only in terms of ethnicity, but also in terms of gender. And so with that, I'll say that although the war on women has caused a great deal of distress among many of us, I think it's a war that we will win. And I also hope that it's a reminder that we can take nothing for granted. That those of us who are in my age bracket, who remember when birth control was in fact illegal in Connecticut, will remember to remind the young women of today who've taken a lot of their rights for granted that nothing can be taken for granted. Everything must be fought for. We're in this together. I look forward to the agenda that you will be putting together, and so that I can play my part in helping to enact it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Lofgren, for continuously advocating for women and girls. It's been stated multiple times this morning about the feminist capital of the world, starting during the late 80s and 90s here in the Silicon Valley. I'm happy to report that we've brought together a very special group, as you can see, of these women pioneers. They are here to share their experiences and knowledge, their observations and wisdom about women and girls today, and what is needed to reinvigorate the women's movement, and what we as a community can do together to support and improve the status and well-being of women and girls. Now, I'm going to moderate. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that with my back to them. So perhaps, Carla, maybe I can move up there? Is that all right? Okay.
You know, you can move it around.
I just like to say Carla. Sorry, I don't fit back here. I'm a little big. So, to continue my comments, the State of Women and Girls has 6 honorary chairs. These are some of our local matriarchs who, with over a half century of political representation between them, have made possible much of the success women and girls have had in our county. We're going to hear from each of them some sage advice on how to move forward during this final section of the program that we're calling We've Made History, now Let's Make Progress. Let's start with one woman here who is actually in office right now, Liz Niss. And if I may, Supervisor Niss, actually also thank you for your work on the Poet Laureate work for the county. Having done a little bit of work with that, I just wanted to appreciate your efforts with that.
Thank you.
So Supervisor Niss, it seems possible that we will have a male supervisor replacing you when your term ends later this year, which creates an all-male board of supervisors. Can you comment on how we can continue to have the female voice represented in policy decisions?
You mean when there are no men sitting up here whatsoever? Is that what you mean?
When there are no women.
I would tell you this, it will be harder. And how long an answer do you want? Truly, because we want to respect everybody's time.
Okay, so let's do 3 minutes if that's all right.
Good. So the first thing I would say to all of you out here is, why the hell not? How did we get here? What happened? What happened that women either are running less, which they certainly are, I think Zoe just addressed that. But beyond that, let me just trace this for a minute. I'm of the generation where women frequently stayed home and raised the kids. That was fairly common. It was post-Mad Men, but pre the wild 80s. So just looking at us from that point of view, kind of taking it by decades, I look back, it was not unusual for my friends and me to be very involved in the League of Women Voters or something similar and get very involved in politics, especially at an issue level, leading to being involved with different campaigns. It kind of led us where we are today. And if I look up and down the row, many of us were in the same. Becky Morgan and I started with the school board. A very progressive kind of way to get into politics. I don't know what's happened since then, but I look at my daughter and realize that it takes often two parents to raise a family and both need to be working. Is that what's affecting what's happening? I don't know exactly, but I think one of the things we need to look at as a group is why are women running less? Many groups are looking and trying to define that, and what does make the difference in the end? And how do we communicate differently? And believe me, we do. There is no question. I have missed having a woman on the board with me. I've missed having, it's a different kind of conversation. For all the women in the room, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. There is a better, perhaps, communication at some level. So I would start with that.
Thank you.
And the challenge. The challenge is, how come? What's happened?
Thank you, Supervisor Niss. I also want to acknowledge that I had originally said that we had 6, and I know that former Mayor Susan Hammer is supposed to be here, but is just a little bit sick, we'll take a beating over at ACE Charter School, and we've been keeping her quite busy. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And next, I'd like to go to you, Becky Morgan. Some of the most, and I just wanted to acknowledge my boss, Connie Martinez, who always speaks so highly of you. And Connie hates for me to call her my boss, but she's my boss. I love it. Some of the most surprising data we have heard today is in the area of economic prosperity and around the higher wage gap that exists for women in Santa Clara County compared to national statistics. Does this surprise you? And what role do you think the private sector can play in addressing these issues, especially locally?
I think you're asking why women make less money than men, to put it very simply. Our statistics really show that more women are in government and nonprofits. They're paid less. More women are in the food industry, the services, hotels, domestics. That pays less. More women work as caregivers, not well paid, often as a volunteer. Our report actually doesn't make a difference between women in the corporate world and all women. But we do know, anecdotally at least, that women in the corporate world also make less for the same job. We've made gains, yes, as has been mentioned. And one of the things that I'm particularly interested in is the readiness for kindergarten gains that have been made that are reported in this report. Santa Clara County in First Five has been a participant in this measurement tool, which measures the whole person, not just the academic readiness. And I hope that we continue to make great progress there. The corporate world, I think, can help by having more high school girls come in for summer programs, by having more interns in the business world, by providing more on-the-job training. But I think until we improve the education for young women, progress will be slow or not at all. And some companies here in Silicon Valley in Santa Clara County have foundations and put a good bit of money into education. My belief is that we need many more companies to be doing that so that we can influence the educational system and let the educators understand the importance of what they're doing to get our girls, not just in STEM and the technology and math programs, but in all learning, particularly those first 4 years, kindergarten to fourth grade, which everybody that's ever been in education knows are crucial to the ability of young people to succeed. So there's a lot that can be done, I think, there. But I think women in positions within any organization should be encouraging to other women, that be mentors. I know it's double duty. You have a family, you have a job, and then you're asked to be a mentor. That's heavy-duty work, but I think unless we continue to support each other and mentor and encourage, it'll be a tough go.
Thank you. And thank you for highlighting the issue around mentoring. We've all had the benefit of having mentors in our lives, and it's something that there are informal and there are formal ways to become a mentor. And I know none of us can actually do what we're doing without that supporting role, that presence. So thank you. I hope everybody's taking notes. Are you all still alive out there? Yeah? We're so far away. I'll have you know I've been joking less today, so, okay. Next question is for Susie Wilson. With your election in 1973 to the San Jose City Council, you were at the beginning of women challenging the electorate to change the political dynamics of the male-dominated governing bodies in our county, local, and state. What's your evaluation, both of the influence women have had and what you believe the future can be for our community and state? In 3 minutes.
Well, I thought I'd begin at the real beginning, when Abigail Adams wrote a letter to her husband, John, who was at the Continental Congress, beginning to create a new nation. And she said, remember the ladies. But then she continued, and I think this is even more important than what is usually remembered. She said, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. Wow. 1776. His return letter was, I cannot help but laugh. And later on indicated that to give ladies a voice in which would be ultimately to subject all of us to the tyranny of the petticoat. We no longer have petticoats. If you notice, we're mostly wearing the pants that they should give to us because we deserve it. 144 years later, after those letters went back and forth, after organizing the first protest march in Washington, D.C. in 1913, then the years that followed, women were jailed, beaten, starved, and ridiculed, and thrown things at them as they marched and brought their banners to Washington. And so, after 1913 to finally in 1920, the 19th Amendment, which was written by Susan B. Anthony, in the 1880s was granted, and some men had the audacity to say that they gave us the vote. We fought for that vote in 1920, and now we had the vote. It took another 50 years for the fruits to begin to be plucked from the tree. And that was when we began to fulfill the prophecy or the wishes of Abigail Adams. And a woman, there were two women. There was one first woman on San Jose City Council, then the second was a woman named Janet Gray Hayes. And I'm sorry she's not here today because she was is a wonderful woman and a great leader for our county. And in 1973, of course, that is when, in the 1970s, are when women began to really fulfill that hope and promise, and that she had said in her letter. The rebellion had arrived. And so we began to have many positive changes affecting us as women and girls because women represents, and women represents us today in every branch of government, administrative and elected, except that top executive. But Madam President will happen. We know that. We've been given been given a blueprint today for the challenges facing us as women and girls in our county. It is crucial that you who are sitting here today, women and men, become the protest voice against the status quo. Much is required of those who understand the needs. Consider what you will do as you accept the community challenges that this report states. Let me suggest some personal challenges to you. Become elected officials, ready to follow those of us who are sitting here today. Become administrators who have the power to advance policies and that eliminate the barriers that face our women and girls today. Become a strong voice to stop the damage that is happening in our county schools. Devise strategies that will ensure that the positive skills of our girls from kindergarten to 4th grade are not lost, but will advance so that they can fully be the people that they want to be. Explore new ways to protect our girls and women and how desperately that is needed in this county so that violence does not mar their lives and they relinquish their lives and they are killed. Aspire to positions of power. Be unafraid to speak out, for silence is to guarantee failure. Jill Ruckelshaus in 1977 at a National Political Women's Caucus convention stated, "We are in for a very long, long haul. I am asking for everything you have to give. In return, at the end of your days, you will be able to look back and say, once in your life, you gave everything to justice." I don't believe it's going to take a long, long haul now. We've hauled enough water. It's time for we to get the results. We have to improve the condition of women and girls in our county. But I do believe that you will look back in 3 years and see what you have done. And with pride, you will be glad that you have accepted the challenges that we face and that I'm asking you to take today. Take up that task. You know, this document is the first in the county, and I do want to express my thanks to the women and the men who put this document together. It took a lot of effort to bring all this to us today to see. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. And I want you to go out and get elected, become administrators, do what you want to do with your life, but make sure that you take care of the women and girls in this county.
Thank you. Aspire to positions of power. It's not often that as women and girls we hear that. So I just wanted to pull that out again and repeat that, to aspire to positions of power. Okay, next I'm going to go to the woman who is often confused as my mother, and I take that always like, yes, that is fine. I love my mama, but I would be just fine with Blanca being my mama too.
I mean,
When Blanca met me, she said, "Are you related to me?" I'm from the southern tribe of Alvarados. All right, Blanca. So speaking for a moment, Latina to Latina, some of the data we heard today highlights the serious challenges facing our particular community as Latinas. We're most likely to live in poverty, least likely to graduate high school, on a fast track into the criminal justice system, most likely to die as a result of domestic violence. It goes on and on. So as someone who's always championed communities who are often marginalized and overlooked, what should this community be doing to address the specific needs of Latinas?
Thank you very much, Tamara, and good morning. And thanks as well to Esther and to Carla and to the advisory group, Andrea, and all those of you who have worked on making this the conference that it is. Let me start, however, by very specifically thanking the few males that are in the audience, including Supervisor Wasserman. You know, I really would have liked to have seen more men in this audience, because quite frankly, this subject is about men and it's about women as well. So thank you to those of you who are here. And the other thing that I want to be very clear about is that I come at this question from a very different experience than most of the women up here on the dais. And so I want to say that while my comments may seem negative to some of you, they're intended to speak with the truth that I believe in, and that recognizes that much of what we are facing today in the report that has been issued is a product of the political environment and the history of this country for many, many years. So, with that said, let me begin by telling you that whether one sees the glass as half full or as half empty is a matter of perspective. Women have made significant gains during the past decades, and as I look through the lens of my own personal history and experiences, I am very, very saddened by the realization that, number one, in all of the domains referred to in the report today, Latinas are overly impacted in a very harsh and negative way. And by the realization that after so many years of advocacy and activism by so many, the gender gap appears to have widened. Even though women are a larger percentage of the population, males continue to dominate in those positions of power and influence that set the framework and the agenda for how the nation is governed and managed. Wage disparities and underrepresentation in the halls of Congress, at the state capitals, and even at the local government level, and as well as the current national debate in the GOP presidential nomination process regarding our productive rights, coupled with the sexualization, the objectification of women, are real indicators to me, real indicators of our status as second-class citizens. For Latinas, moreover, the barriers to achievement, prosperity, and equality are magnified by a political infrastructure that stigmatizes, demeans, and devalues communities of color. Political movements and initiatives like Proposition 187, the Arizona and Alabama laws, have made it clear to already marginalized communities that we are a threat to the economic, political, and cultural character of this country. Let me also say that the elimination of bilingual education and affirmative action programs drastically reduced our human and civil rights. Those are all historical facts, seen from my perspective. These social conditions have created an environment of fear, unworthiness, loss of dignity, which has led to school failure, overrepresentation in the criminal justice system, our kids being locked up. 70% of the kids in juvenile hall are Latinos. That's a shameful statistic. Domestic violence and the psychological belief that we don't belong, even when we can trace our ancestry over multiple generations. So, despite the negative picture that I have painted, which is a reflection of our history, there are some pretty outstanding things that are going on, nevertheless. And I, for one, since my retirement, since I left the Board of Supervisors, have been overly optimistic because of what I see in the neighborhoods. Not unlike the Occupy movement, there is a vibrancy, a resilience, an excitement going on in neighborhoods that is really, really optimistic and hopeful for some of the statistical changes that we will see in the reports that come out in the next 5 to 10 years. Let me tell you what are some of the things that are happening, because I think that really is the answer to improving conditions for Latinas and for women generally. If you look at the progressive policies of county government and hopefully of city government, we the community, are active agents of change. We are creating institutions that provide a sense of purpose and belonging, and we have been developing cultural forms of expression that not only keep identity and heritage alive, but significantly enrich the cultural whole of this country. Iconic leaders like Luis Valdez and artistic engagements by Teatro Visión, our locally grown performing arts organization, these institutions already in place keep our traditions vibrant and alive and joyful. The motivation is simply to create spaces of engagement and learning. And that is why we applaud the work that is going on with the Grail Family Services and their new program called Ven, Habla Conmigo. The transformational efforts that are currently underway at Somos Mayfair. I don't know how many of you know about Somos Mayfair, but many of you are supporters of the work that is going on in the Mayfair barrio. But in that instant, the transformational efforts that are underway are igniting community change by putting learning and empowerment into action. Families are developing leadership skills within their own social context by building the capacity of individuals on a range of issues that include domestic violence, political issues, women's health and human rights, and all of the ills that were produced in this report. The Latina Leadership Academy, which I am very proud to say I founded, together with Mayra Cruz and Teresa Castellanos, is intended to cultivate a systematic, intentional, and comprehensive Latina leadership strategy grounded in cultural values of community, integrity, and social justice. You have organizations like HOPE, Hispanas Organized for Political Equity. This organization is preparing Latinas to advance politically in California. We have also the Hispanic Foundation, and at the National Hispanic University, where I spoke last week, much progress is being made in preparing students for higher education. So, the glass is half full. We have a long ways to go. But I believe that the work that is happening at the grassroots level, the work that is happening among progressive communities like ours, all of that bodes well for a future that will be improved, and where Latinos and Latinas and other marginalized communities will achieve the status that they deserve. They will also have developed and are developing already the skills necessary to become the leaders of the future and to once again bring forward an agenda that speaks to the humanity, to the skills, to the talents, to the strengths, to the resilience, to the perseverance, to the optimism that we all share in common. I think those are some of the answers, Tamara. Certainly they're not all of the answers, but I believe that we have come away in addressing what has been, in many instances, the failure of many of our institutions to help us to progress. But we will do it. We will not give up.
Thank you, Blanca. Thank you. Blanca's holding up two programs, one for the Latina Leadership Academy, and then the other one for Somos Mayfair. And thank you for mentioning those groups, such as Teatro Visión and Teatro Campesino, Somos Mayfair, the Grail, at the School of Arts and Culture at the Mexican Heritage Plaza. It's an honor to work together with them.
Thank you.
And I think if you all were taking notes, there were also several calls to action too across the board. And now we're going to go just immediately to my right. Hello. How are you?
I feel like an Alvarado sandwich.
I love it. Everybody's been making some really great jokes. Makes my job easier. Thank you. Okay, good. Let's break it up, right? So, Diane, you are known for bridging a progressive agenda across multiple sectors, political, private, nonprofit. What have you learned over the years, and what would you recommend to the people who are working to advance issues for women about what is needed to engage groups across these sectors? In relatively, 3 minutes or so.
In 2 minutes or less.
I'm getting the eye over here.
First of all, I want to thank everyone who's here today and the men and women who all participated and had a hand in putting this report together and will have a hand in implementing it. I think it's always important to take a moment and to take a snapshot of where we are so then we can say whether or not we're progressing and in what areas and where do we need to move. So I want to just thank everyone for that, that's had a hand in that. Second, I saw a sign that I believe was held by Drina Collins at the start that said, women invest 90% of their income in their family and in their community, and men invest 40% of their income in their family and their community. And if there's no other reason than that to support women, to work for women's causes, to do everything you can to see women get elected, to move into positions of leadership on boards, in science and technology, if for no other reason than that, that is a very powerful outcome. When you think about what women do for the community in just the sheer numbers of that kind of investment. In fact, someone won a Nobel Peace Prize, whose name I'm forgetting, because he gave loans to women based upon that fact, knowing that's what women do. And so I just feel that that was part of my commitment to women and girls in my time in political office. And I just want to say, I think, picking up on what Blanca said, things are not, you can look at the glass as half empty or half full, because working to bring people together across sectors or across jurisdictions is never easy. You have different cultures, you have different organizational structures, you have different commitments. So it takes a little more time than you would think to actually accomplish what you want to accomplish. But I think what you accomplish is much richer and much broader based if you can bring the public, the private, and the nonprofit sector together to work on an issue. But before you can begin to bring people together, they have to trust you. And there has to be trust in what you've been able to accomplish. And if you think about it, if a friend, someone called you up and said, I'd like you to work with me on this, the first thing you think of, perhaps unconsciously, is, will this work, or will this be worth my time? So before you begin, you have to have established some sort of trust that what you say or what you do, people can count on. I think people need to understand also how the issue will affect them. And sometimes you need to make the case. I can remember when we were working on the children's shelter and trying to bring in the private sector, we needed to show them and demonstrate what the investment, their investment, was going to have on protecting and preserving the lives of children and making them successful, if you will, taxpayers well into the future. So you have to present the case so that shows how each of you can benefit from that. And I think you need to develop a shared vision and outcomes so that you know that at the end, this is what your success will look like. Because it's interesting to see when, after people have been working on the project for a while, some will say, well, I thought we were going to do this, or I thought we were going to do that. So I think it's important for people to know what that success will look like and get that agreement early on. And I think the players who come together to participate in a project have to come from relatively equal status within their relative organizations and have the ability to make decisions. And I think that's very important, because I can tell you on one particular project that I was working on, actually, that dealt with transportation, when people begin to send to the meeting their assistants, you already know you've lost them.
Yeah.
You need to have the decision maker sitting there. You need to have the person who's committed to that sitting there. And you need to keep them at the table. Because if you're not at all close to that relative level within your organization, it is not going to happen. And you can waste a lot of time on that. I think also any project that you're working on has to have, again, the relatively equal priority in each of the organizations. I worked on a project where one particular organization was responsible for the legal side of it. And I have to tell you that was very, very difficult, because the legal department had it as their last priority. And so as we were working and working, we kept waiting and waiting for the information to come from the legal department. So you have to figure out a way to get all the parties having their effort being relatively at that same priority level. And then I think you need to look at how you're going to share the successes and who's going to take credit for it. And in this particular case, I have found that women are a little bit better at doing that than men. But it is important that you all find a way to equally share in the success of any of your endeavors. And lastly, but not leastly, is that any effort that you take on where you bring parties together, it has to be important to both of you, and it has to be fun. If you can't enjoy it, don't start. If you can't bring something to the table that makes it all worthwhile and you look forward to, then the project isn't going to be successful. So I would just like to, again, thank everyone and tell you that I'm walking away learning more today than actually I brought to the table. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, for really for offering some of the nuts and bolts behind the organizing of groups and implementing strategy. So some of those things are things that we just need to kind of refresh in our memory, that this is how we go about doing business as women. Thank you. And thank you to our honorary chairs for giving us so much more to think about as we move forward and prepare a policy agenda for women and girls. Now, for a few final remarks, one of our county's leading and most enduring philanthropists, Carmen Castellano, with the Castellano Family Foundation.
This is pretty high for someone that's 4'11" and 3/4 tall. I used to be 5 feet tall. Good morning. My name is Carmen Castellano. I'm the president of the Castellano Family Foundation, which was established here 10 years ago in December of 2001. And in the last 10 years, we've awarded over $3 million to 125 organizations. Thank you. And they're primarily here in Santa Clara Valley. The Castellano Family Foundation is dedicated to the cultivation and enrichment of Latino family values and the arts. And many of the organizations that we've been funding over these 10 years have been in support of issues that affect women and girls. We've awarded grants to the Women's Foundation of California, the Commission on the Status of Women, the Latina Leadership Alliance that Blanca just mentioned. We funded that program. And we're supporting this Women and Girls Summit for the second year. We've also awarded grants to organizations that train women to be leaders in their own communities and elsewhere, and organizations that deal with issues that are very relevant to women and girls: domestic violence, health, education, counseling services, and youth empowerment. So investing in girls and women and girls must be a priority at every level of decision making and across all sectors. In Santa Clara County, we continually see the powerful impact of women leadership in business, the nonprofit sector, the arts, education, and public policy. And studies show that investing in women and girls reduces poverty, stimulates the economy, and leads to better health and nutrition outcomes for women and girls and for their families. And globally, women represent the largest market opportunity in the world, with women controlling $20 trillion in annual consumer spending, and that amount is growing. Imagine what would happen if women had equal pay and equal access to careers in non-traditional areas. Their economic buying power would be even more significant. Imagine if there were no glass ceilings, and if the number of women managers in corporate America and in public service were equal to those of men. And we can no longer afford to have women and girls behind as we seek sustainable solutions for how to move our country and our economy forward. I commend the County of Santa Clara for the report on the status of the women and girls in Santa Clara County. It will move us forward, ensuring a brighter future for women and girls. And I urge all of us, philanthropists like myself, government, political leaders, private companies, company organizers, youth and adults, to educate ourselves and take action to make sure that women and girls have every opportunity to succeed and be fully equal in our society. Our community and our families deserve nothing less. Thank you all for being here.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. As Carmen said, there's quite a bit of information for us to digest. There's quite a bit for us to do. I know there's a lot of numbers sticking in my head, 70%, 15%, 48%. And so I urge you all to just take a look at the numbers and kind of figure out what part are you going to participate in. And please do go to the website, which I don't know off the top of my head, which I'm sure is in the report. Please do go to the website, please call, please email, and please do give your input. This is about our community. It's not from somewhere else. It's not a report that we say, oh, that's good. So let's look at it. Let's give some real input. We are opinionated, so please, across the board, let's use that opinion to inform this report and make it a real document. So please now join us in the breezeway for a light reception. Thank you all.
Yeah.